think we are live. And first of all, welcome to everybody that joined directly in. Uh, Michael K, Mike D, Misguiding Light. Thanks for joining in. Um, at some point, I'll stop yapping, maybe every 5 or so minutes, and kind of give you an opportunity to ask a question if we get too deep into a certain area of this and you want something answered. But we're going to try to keep the topic pretty tight as far as specific to ESW and active SS or surface ship type radar. So primarily surface to surface. The same process can work and will work for LAS or low altitude search or 3D search for air search as well. So, but we won't get too deep into that. We'll stick to surface. Let me start sharing my screen here, and hopefully this works. This is the first time I've done this live like this. Give me a second. I'm going to share my whole screen. Okay, now you should see my screen as basically an attendee. So if you click on the voice channel itself, the ES and active radar itself as a whole, you should see my desktop. And then if you want to see it better, you click on my desktop and you'll see it a lot better. Okay, let's see. Everybody good as far as seeing me? As far as seeing my desktop?
I can see it.
Okay. Alright, let me just take a look, make sure everything's going okay. Yep, we're good. And we shall start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk really slowly through a document that I wrote myself. I'll give a copy of this to folks that attend and so forth after I vet it with the ATG group. I am not a member of the ATG group. First of all, let me just tell you that. This document is unofficial. This is just my own notes to myself. But I've gone through them a few times. I just need to vet them and maybe clean them up just a little bit. I made this based on the jumpstart data, so hopefully, there's nothing in here. I'm just trying to not give away too much information from the rules during this. But so we're going to start with ES detection. Or electromagnetic support system detection. Now, what I've done here is just kind of stepped it through. So for most naval wargaming I've ever done, I tend to think linearly, right, step by step. So that's what I've kind of tried to break this down. And again, I will provide this document to you as soon as I clean it up. One of the first things you do is determine the ES generation of the originator. You're trying to detect an enemy who's activated their radar. Okay, so I assume everybody here understands that fact that an ES system is basically picking up the radar emission of a target. Okay, so this is a passive detection, a part of the detection phase. Which, if you go, I can't remember the section of the book, but the phasing is pretty simple. Unfortunately, I kind of need something that's a little more direct. So, again, first things first, you check the ES generation, third generation, and that will come into play down here when we get into it. So, one of the next things you need to do is determine whether or not, from the scenario, I'm not going to get into the rules on how the GM can detect that from a what season is it perspective, but the GM will basically roll to see if an evaporative duct is present or not, right? So if there is one present, right, you would use the evaporative duct high refraction table, which is on page 5.3. If we take a look, I'm trying to not show the rules too directly throughout this, but I have to kind of show it. But so if an evaporative duct is present and you're trying to do an ES detection, a passive detection of an enemy ship, a Russian guided missile carrier, cruiser, whatever pocket frigate, if you will, if they've turned on their radar, and there's an evaporative duct present, you would use this chart. Okay, we'll get a little bit into the details of that here in a second. Okay, so that's step two. Let's see. There is a small caveat, and I did want to point this one out in case you are. Oop, that didn't work well. In case you are captaining a Soviet ship or a Russian ship. I think there are Chinese ships that also have this capability. But if you have an SS-T type of system, which is basically a surface targeting system, it's specifically designed for targeting. Okay, there is a caveat there on page 5.4, and I'll show you if I can find it. I kind of wrote it so I wouldn't have to find it, but right about here, about Russian targeting systems. Hold on. That was not the right place. Oh, here it is right here. Let me see, make sure that's right. Yep. It explains that a medium-sized Russian or Chinese system that has an SS-T radar, and it's using it for ES capability. That's one of its capabilities, right? Is to be able to do an active detection as well. Then, if you are a medium-sized originator, right, and you are treated as a small originator for evaporative duct purposes, okay? Now, being an SST user, you also get a bonus down here, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. I'm going to slow down. I'm going to stop talking. Do any of you have any questions up through this, like step 3, about any of these 3 things?
So if the radar horizon, let's say from a medium to a medium, is
Okay.
23, but the evaporative duct
Is present.
is present,
Mm-hmm.
and from a medium to a medium that's 60,
Correct.
you use the evaporative duct value to determine if times the modifier of the ES.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Okay.
And we'll get into that. If it's present, you can use it if the scenario says you can use it for your size. And that's why I brought up this third rule, right? This little caveat rule, right? So if you, let's see, I think in the jump start, if we take a quick look at the jump start, I believe in their case an evaporative duct is present, and if I'm not mistaken, it is for small or less. Let's just take a look. I should have had this already, sorry. If we look at the scenario, here it is right here. So this usually would be determined by the GM before you start the scenario, right? So if your originator, what was your example before, medium or small? I can't remember what you just said.
From medium to medium. So in this case, it
It
wouldn't
would
apply.
not. In the jumpstart scenario, it would not. Okay. Except in the case of the Russian missile carrier, cruiser, pocket carrier. In which case, let me show you that. If we look down at the Rosviet, you see how this has a monolith T, which is an SS-T system. I don't know why that's not listed here. Maybe it's listed down here. There we go. You see right here? Because this is an SST type, it's a targeting system type SS, right? So it gets that little loophole where they're a medium originator, right? But they're treated as a small for evaporative duct, and that's because the Russians would put it lower. They knew, well, first of all, the system was designed for it too, but I also believe that they kept it lower in the center of the ship so that it would be able to take advantage of it. So that's a distinct advantage for being a Russian medium-sized ship with an SST, if you have an SST. So does that make sense?
Yep.
But exactly what you said was right, was that If it's present, and you can, and this scenario and or this caveat allows you to take advantage of it, then yes, you would use that other chart. And we'll do a little bit of an example in Simplot too to show that too. Okay. The SST type also comes into play here. That's why I highlighted it. When you start to do the modifiers for the ES range. So I don't know if, I believe you also mentioned that too, did you not?
Yeah.
Yeah, the ES capability. All right, we'll get to it. All right, so again, we'd gone through the steps 2, 3, 4, whatever. If there was a surface duct present, you would instead, oops, that's incorrect. You would use the surface duct charts, right? And you'd use the surface duct RF trapping table. It is stronger. The surface duct is stronger than the evaporative duct, if I'm not mistaken, and it would basically supersede the evaporative duct. I believe that's correct. If I'm wrong on that, somebody please correct me. But I believe that if a surface duct is present, it would supersede. Okay, and if you look at the chart, I think you get more of a range. See how this is the surface duct one, right? So exactly like you had described it before, but you'd even get more range, right? I believe the surface duct is significantly more rare to occur, right? All right, and then the fallout of the logic, if you will, is that if neither are present, which can be the case, or you're a medium US originator, right? And you don't have an SS-T, so let's say it's the late 80s and you're on an O.H. Perry frigate, your third generation, but you don't get advantage of the ducts. So let's see. Gave an example here, but I think we've already done that. So small versus small, attempting strictly radar ES versus radar without the duct, you get a 19 nautical mile. And here's the point where you check the ES generation table. It's midway on the right hand side of page 5.6. Let's take just a quick look at that. Deep dot, deep dot, dot. Okay. This is how much you would multiply your ES detection by, your base detection by, in order to get your range. Okay, so before in our example, we had, again, this example here was without an evaporative duct. If you had a 19 nautical mile base radar line of sight and your ES generation was third, you would get a 1.3 modifier to it. So again, in this specific case, O.H. Perry frigate against a target surface ship, you get 24.7 nautical mile range, and that is a potential detection range. Okay, and I'll mention that down here. There's a very slight chance of not doing it in a tactical turn. You would use the same multiplier if you'd either use the evaporative duct or a surface duct, and I think you mentioned that before, that you do get that multiplier if the duct is present as well. And this is that other caveat I mentioned, is that if the observer is an SS-T, which is usually Russian or Chinese, passive mode, using its ES capabilities, that's one of its special powers, if you will. It has the modifiers listed on 5.6, which is an addition to that base ES generation modifier. So back here in the US O.H. Perry example, in which case we don't get this was a 1.3. But if for some reason that O.H. Perry had an SST radar, which it wouldn't, you would get an additional boost to that generation, which is right here on the right hand side of 5.6, right? There's a slight additional boost based on the target type, right? So in most cases, probably we're looking at a surface search radar emitter, right? So you get a +3. So if for any odd reason somebody installed an SST on an O.H. Perry, they would get that additional bump, which would bump this modifier, right? In which case it would have been a 19 times 1.6 for your resolution. Does that make sense up to that point, everybody?
Yes, it does.
Okay, awesome.
Do you have to have a surface duct to take advantage of that extra? Because it says their ES modifiers against different rate. Oh, sorry. Modes are designed to take advantage of the surface duct. So if there wasn't a surface duct, would it still be usable?
Let's take a look at that. For surface ducting will also affect ES for a surface such as Russian target in passive mode. Take advantage of the surface duct. They're ES multipliers. You are correct that this is for ES only, and it is.
Is it only surface duct?
I believe you might be right there. Let me take advantage. You are correct. Let me put a caveat on that. Thank you for correcting me on that. Is that better? I'll reword that a little bit better, but I'll vet that a little bit more. But I think you're correct. Okay.
Can I ask a question on that? If you go back to
Mm-hmm.
the rule stated there said surface duct.
Would that be different than like an evaporative duct?
It would.
Yes. Is that different than the evaporative one, or they combined them right there?
Is that part of the text still a part of the example though? So they're just referencing that in the context of the example?
This is mine. This is my typing here, right here.
No, I know, but that paragraph you highlighted in the rule book, is that still a part of the example in the paragraph above, where they're just referencing the surface duct within the example, but it could apply to other situations?
I think you might be correct. Let's see.
I think the paragraph ends, so the new paragraph would end the example.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't even gotten the book yet, but I just didn't know.
Complex in passive mode designed to take advantage of the surface duct. Okay. The way I read this would be surface duct only, right? I can check on that. I'll check on that with the authors.
Well, actually, an example below it, it still adds it in, even when there isn't a duct or a duct.
And add the modifier. You're correct.
Okay, so I think that to take
I think it's
advantage
universal.
Yeah, I think they added that in for flavor text, like the background, that part right there.
Right. Like, in other words, that this is not necessarily the only situation you do it.
Right.
It seems like it's generic. It seems like it's used anywhere, and that's probably why I originally wrote it that way. I'm going to check on this.
It does sound generic there, but errata time.
Give us the Chinese units first, then do errata.
Yeah, I'll do an errata on my red.
I agree.
But no, this is great. I like this. All right, I'll check on that. So what I'll do is I'll get an answer on that, and I'll comment it. I'll put a comment in the Discord, but I'll also comment on the YouTube video too. All right, so if you're doing all this jazz, right? If you're doing it within a tactical turn, there's still a 90% chance of detection. I don't know if y'all caught that when reading the rules. Okay, so in 5.3 it mentions that, right? During an intermediate turn, the detection is 100%. Okay. What do you get? Right? You'll know the bearing of the radar emission within a plus minus 15 degree arc. You'll also know the type of radar involved, and that's it. There's another exception to that, the Russian exception, as we'll call it. The exception is that the Russian SST type, when used for its ES passive detection, has a much better plus minus 5 degree arc. So this will give you a little bit of a more precise targeting of an enemy ship while in passive mode, while still in MCON passive mode. All right, so before we move on, that's passive detection of an enemy surface ship with an ES system.
If you're a GM, for this here with that plus minus 15 degree arc.
Yep.
How do you determine how far it goes to each side without?
That's right. Very good question. Very good question. And I had this and I've talked to other GMs about that. I the way I do it, if you really want to get simulation-y about it, you could randomize that if you really wanted to. I tend to just center it on. I can show you in simple how I would do that. I don't know if I have any arcs in here. Maybe we'll do one right at the end. But what I would tend to do is just center it. And they know the basic area where it's at. If they get closer, they'll get a precise. If you go active, you'll. It hasn't run. I haven't run into a situation where that degree of granularity or randomness came into play, so I haven't questioned it too much, right? It's a valid question though. How do you randomly detect that? I mean, in other words, if it's that not accurate or inaccurate, you could simulate that inaccuracy, I think, by maybe randomizing it in some way, a D30 if you want, or whatever you want, or whatever you use, right? That's a good question. I don't know. There's no ruling on it, right? And it's slightly oddly worded in that it says anywhere between, right? So it's almost like it should be a random arc as well to some degree, right? But there's no rule for it, right? So the way I do it is I personally just simplify it, and I give them a center arc with a 15-degree arc. I might shift it about 5 degrees each way, but a little bit of GM leverage on that one. So that's it on passive. Any other questions on passive detection with an ES system? And if you think about any questions, you can always ask it again in Discord or on the YouTube as a comment or something.
Here's a quick request. I don't know if you mind zooming in a little bit.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.
Is that a little better, or you want more?
Yeah, I mean, anything's better. It's pretty small. I'm on a laptop though, so.
Yeah, no, it could be small on Discord. Yeah, sorry about that. And again, I'll send this to the ATG group just to kind of cleanse it a little bit, just to make sure they won't want me to remove anything else right before I send it out. But I tried as hard as I could to just reference all the sections instead of just copying and pasting. But all right, so we're gonna move on to active surface to surface or ship to ship radar target detection. All right, so let's just say you've had a passive enemy target for a certain period of time, or you have a helicopter that's up giving you some active information, so you kind of know basically where the guy is, and hey, you're ready to get a better resolution, or at least a better potential target resolution. So we're not going to get into the the FC or the fire control resolution here too much. I will mention it, and I will show a chart, because once you ultimately detect the enemy, that doesn't mean you can target it, okay? Or it doesn't mean that you will have a fair or a good resolution. There are going to be situations where, especially for the U.S. originators, right, because they do not have that SST targeting system specifically for trying to go over the horizon. So this is where there is a little bit more ambiguity, and by all means, when I get through this, ask questions, and if I don't have the answer, then I might be able to try to go get the answer for it. All right, so in general, it's the same steps as passive. Okay, I am gonna just move this out one zoom level. It's just gonna get in my eyes for some reason. All right, can you still read this? Okay, or at least okay. All right, so it is the same. Here, let me see if I can just change this. It's basically the same method, right? The main difference is, but you ignore the SST targeting modifier as well as the ES generation modifier. Okay, so in effect, all said and done, the main things you ignore or any of those caveat modifiers, right? Any of the SST targeting modifiers. Now, what you will still need to check ultimately is whether or not you are an OTHT system, whether or not you're an over-the-horizon system later, and that's specifically for FC, for targeting, but we'll talk about that very gently at the end. Okay. The other difference is that there's radar clutter involved. All right. So one of the first things you need to do is check the radar clutter value on page 5.5. We'll take a look at it after I get through these things right here. You add up each of the values based on land, sea state, and precipitation to get a final positive number. Okay, and then you subtract the clutter resistance based on the combat system generation of the observer. Right. So your system might be is a little better than older systems at resisting that clutter effect. Okay, and then you come up with a net clutter value, which you then look at the radar range modifier table, and we'll take a look real quick so all this starts to go together. Hopefully I didn't go by it. All right. So here's all those tables we just talked about. So your ship, you take your positive values here. You take your positive value of the sea state. Most scenarios probably not going to be above 4, but who knows? You might be in a stronger situation. And then precipitation also adds to it. Okay. And then you would subtract the generation of the clutter resistance of the originator. Okay. I think in the jumpstart scenario, just for a direct example, like right here, they start the monolith T of the ROSFET, and then there's a radar clutter value. You see that? C state 4 adds up to 7, right? And they subtract the clutter resistance, so it ends up being a -4. If we look at that chart, no modifier, right? If you're in negative, then you don't end up with a range modifier. Okay, so all that babbling, all the clutter resistance, blah blah blah, adds up to a net clutter value, which ends up being a range modifier. Okay. So
Can I make a comment real quick?
Yep.
That clutter value, I don't know, it's not additive. You picked the highest value.
No, you are correct. Actually, I think I just saw that. Let me make a note of that.
So if it was like a sea state 1 but torrential downpour, you'd pick the highest value there, which would be 11. But if you had a hill or a town or torrential rain, you'd pick 12 because of the hill or town.
Maybe then you don't stack, is what y'all are saying.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, it's section 5294, by the way.
5294. That mentions that? Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'll make an adjustment to that. Okay.
Actually, the first sentence, so.
Alright. So as I mentioned before we started on those first 3 steps, you do pretty much everything we did before. But you ignore the SST targeting modifier, as well, that additive modifier, as well as the ES generation. But very similar, pretty much the same as the ES determination. You would eventually use the evaporative duct table or the surface duct table instead of the radar line of sight table if it's present. There are certain situations where that will make it worse, right? And there's certain situations where it might improve. Let's get back to the example. So this is key here. You make sure to check whether your computed detection range is beyond the radar's limits. Okay. And in particular, this is used for when they're not using the evaporative duct or the surface duct tables. Okay. So as you see, I think it's mentioned at the bottom of the table right here. That's where I'm kind of quoting. The detection range of the radar is either the annex range, basically the radar range for the particular signature, or the radar horizon, whichever is shorter. So I wish I gave a more direct example here, but we'll get into it a little bit better in the simplot when we start looking at that just a little bit.
When it comes to most ship to ship interactions, the radar horizon should always be longer, or sorry, the radar's effective range will pretty much always be longer than the radar horizon, especially in modern warships.
Yeah, in most scenarios, especially in like the scenario I'm doing right now with folks. Yeah, there's a Russian radar, and I think it's only like 20 nautical miles or 25 nautical miles, but then with the evaporative duct it's much further. You'll see it a little bit more visually when we start looking at the examples. Okay, so has been used. What is stated? Okay. Now, there is a small caveat on page 5-6 about that states another problem is if the ducted line of sight is greater than the radar's maximum range, then you get spurious information. And what they mean by that is that you only get the bearing as a result if it extends beyond your radar's maximum range for that target size. Now, what it doesn't necessarily get into is whether or not if you further track the target, whether or not that information gets better or not, because overall the information provided for the first turn of detection, you'll know the target's bearing and range. Okay. If the detection remains for a second turn or more, you end up knowing the course and speed. Okay. Here's the big thing. Here's the big, not gotcha, but yay, you've detected it. That doesn't mean you can target it, right? And what's really nice is there's a fire control solution quality for non-OTHT system table. It's on, I think it's in 6.3. Let's go take a look at that. As a matter of fact, I think I actually kept it out as an image for this sake. All right, so look right here. So even if you've detected the target beyond any of these ranges right here, right? So let's just say we were passive, right? You use this passive RF chart for FC resolution. And if you do not have an OTHT system, what they mean by an OTHT system is an over horizon -T or targeting system, right? So the SS-T systems have an advantage, right? If you were an SST based system or a targeting complex based system, you don't use this table, right? The modifier is basically 0, and you have no maximum fire control quality involved. So for some reason, for example, you had an active detection around 55 nautical miles, right, based on your size and the target size. The maximum you could do, I don't know why I'm not able to, darn it, sorry. Alright, so the maximum you're able to do is right here. So this ends up becoming an FCS modifier or a fire control modifier, but more importantly, you get a poor resolution, right? Because basically the evaporative duct is extending your radar capability and making it less accurate, right? Unless you're an SST based system. Does that make sense? Okay. And similarly for passive. And I don't want to get too deep into the fire control, but ultimately that is another benefit for having a Russian SST targeting system. Make sure I've touched upon everything here. There's another caveat for having an SST system. 50 reasons for wanting to be Russian, right? With a targeting complex, there's some conflicts. There's some conflicting statements about data links and whether or not, and what it says here, right? But what I will point out is that there's a very specific mention that if you have an SST radar targeting complex and you're within 15 nautical miles of another Russian surface unit with the same complex, you can pass your resolution directly to your comrade. Right? And that's on page 5.2. Slightly conflicting with other data link mentions in the rules. But I don't want to get too much into data links because there's some ambiguity around it, and I believe that they're actually going to be producing an errata or an article about data links in general as to what you're able to pass and so forth, resolutions. So that's an interesting little tidbit there too. Just for visualization's sake, let's take a look in Simplot. So what I did is I just threw up a Greece Turkey operational area. And this is an O.H. Perry frigate, just to kind of visualize everything we've been talking about, right? So this white circle is its radar line of sight versus a small, right? It might help. Let me bring out the modifiers real quick. Can you see that okay? Right here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So again, so color for color here, just to give you a little bit better view of the ranges here. So this is a 19 nautical mile. This is that base. Let's go back to the chart. This is that base. I think that might even be incorrect. No, that's it. This is purely the radar line of sight of small versus small. Okay. So again, that's 19 nautical miles. The radar's limit itself, the SPS 55 on an Oliver Hazard Perry frigate, is 25 nautical miles. So this is the actual system limitation, or at least spec limitation of the radar itself. Now, if you had an evaporative duct present, right, now you see the advantage of the duct, right? And the frigate is a small. The O.H. Perry is a small, so it does get to use it if the scenario says you can use it if you're a small observer. So as you can see, if he was passive, if he was not actively, if his SS was not active, right, and he was trying to use passive detection, right, he would actually be able to see all the way out to there, which is 65. Let's just verify that that's correct. Hopefully I did that right. Yes, because they get the generational modifier as well, right? So I think it's this 50 times 1.3. Hope I got that math right. Please correct me if I didn't. But the O.H. Perry is a small versus a small target. The base is 50, but it gets that ES generation modifier, right? So, whoa. Now you can see all the way out to here, right? Any questions about that? Does that help at all?
So if a target was inside that blue or red area, they'd only get a bearing to the target, correct? They wouldn't know where exactly they fall under that because it's beyond the
very good question.
25.
Okay, so if there was a Russian frigate or pocket cruiser right here, ES, let's go back to the document, right? So for ES, you get the bearing and the type, and you would get a plus or 15 minus degree arc to that. So what I would normally do is I would do this, and I would do this, and I would say ES detection or whatever, right? And I would say, let's just say it was roughly 60 miles out, and I would start it at, what am I heading on this guy? 90. So I would say like start of, this isn't going to be perfect, but this, and I would say 30 degrees, and I would give it a color of whatever, right? And I would make it visible. Does this make sense right here?
Mm-hmm.
That's the start degree. I don't want to get too deep into that Simplot too, but that's the start degree, and that's the angle. Oops, hopefully I didn't. No, I did that wrong. What degree is he heading? Oh, it's relative degrees. Sorry. It's relative bearing. Apologies about that. So relative bearing would actually be, what about 230 or so? No. I don't know what I'm doing wrong there. But
We can just say it's over there.
yeah, it's over there. Sorry. Hold on, I need to be able to get this. I don't know why that's not working. Hold on, just give me 1 second, sorry. So he's going 90. It should be. That should have been like a 320 or something like that, right? Yeah, there we go. Okay. Whew. All right. I haven't lost it entirely. All right. So again, what I was saying was like if the Russian pocket cruiser was here, you would get this information, but it would also tell you the radar type. So you would get a bearing within 30-degree arc. If you want to randomize that, you could, and then you would say exactly what type it was. Okay, I would probably say monolith 10. Excuse me, monolith T. In this case, I think it would be. I would do something like this. I would just do. All right. So then, hey, they know a Russian surface ship is out there, right? And it's active. So they're probably going to fire soon, so you might want to do something. Right? All right. So does that make sense to everybody? Why, for a passive detection, if there was a Russian frigate here, they would be able to get that rough bearing and the type of emission, right? Now let's take that example to the next level. Let's say you activate let's say the next tactical turn you would activate your radar, your SPS 55 surface search. Then this would change, right? This would become, it would become a unknown target. It would become a yellow blip here, right? And let me just turn on the red side. I might even have him out here. Yeah, he would be right here. You see that? He would become. He's a little bit. Okay, it's actually, this is a really good example because he's outside of the radar. You see that? Let's just say he was like right there, but he's outside of the radar range with the duct. You see that right there? You see how that? So if I went.
Yeah, that's.
So if I went active, I actually would not. I would not actively detect him, but I would still, if he had his radar on, I would still detect that. You know what I'm saying? So if this guy, let me modify him real quick. Let me just move him over just a little bit. Let's see, move him to about -10. Watch this. So if he was in the range, see, then I would detect him. And what I would do to him is I would make him visible to blue. I would, let's see, at first we don't know his, at first detection we would know his bearing and range. So what I would do is that first detection I would say, I wouldn't give him heading and speed, right? I would say he's visible to blue, watch this. And I would say, boom, right? And let me modify this arc. Let's see if we can get that to show up on him. Oh, no, of course I'm not, right? My luck with arcs today. Maybe about a 3. Let's just do 0. I think that might get it. It's within it. All right, so if he was still active, I would still detect with my ES detection. I would still have this ping, right? This bearing with this information. So I would still know that he's active. But at that point, he would be within the radar's range with the duct, right? And he would become an active surface target. He would be an unknown surface ship. The next turn, right? Let's just say it was another tactical turn, and maybe he's just this far closer, probably, right? We've probably turned into him. We've probably gone max speed. I don't know, 10, 20 knots, whatever, 24 knots. We would be closer, right? Doesn't necessarily give you that much more of a better resolution or anything to that effect, but then you would know, at that point, you would know the heading and course. Why does it not say course? I thought it would say that.
It has 0 speed. It's not moving.
That would be it. Okay. But again, if that wasn't the case, then I think it would show the course too. Does that make sense, everybody? What we just went over? That was a good example, actually.
Would the OHP know it's hostile based on the type of radar it's using?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I always give that benefit. I mean, usually I would say like if my player didn't have the NX or something like that, didn't own the NX, I would probably give them that information, right? A captain would know this. Their radio officers would know it, right? So just flat out, if it detects a monolith T, I don't know technically if the system says, hey, this could be this, and this. I don't know. I just don't know the systems myself, but I would give the player the information, just generically.
And for a player who doesn't really know military doctrine,
Right.
Would you want to tell the Russian player, hey, you want to be pulsing your active radar, but the U.S. player, you maybe want to be listening all the time until you find something?
Yeah,
Like
it depends on.
how should they be using their radar systems? Like when do you go active, or when should you be staying passive?
Oh, just from what I've seen with having played it at least a few scenarios now, I would say. I mean, it kind of depends on how much information. If everybody's new, I'd give everybody the equal amount of information, right? But pretty much, if you're going active, you should be. If you're going active, either you're being the cavalry and you're trying to give that information to other people, right? But the whole point of going active, I think, at least in what I've seen, is to get a better resolution for firing within 1 to 2 tactical turns, right? The only time you would wait is if you thought you would get a better resolution from waiting, right? And that's kind of baked into, what did we say? It was 6-3. It's kind of baked into the resolution table how long you would want to wait, right? That's something to start getting comfortable with as a GM, is just, and as a player, is, again, yes, when to activate, but how long do you wait? And that is built into the fire control resolution tables, right? Because one of those modifiers is how long you've been waiting, right? The U.S. player, as we kind of discussed before, might have to wait a little bit better for a fair or a good because of this bad boy, right? Which we went over a little bit, right? Again, this is a great example. Let's use this as an example, right? So they can't get a good resolution unless they're less than 35 nautical miles. So if you're in an OH Perry, right? Let's take a look at the sim plot again. So we are 43.8 nautical miles here. You can't get a good resolution until this bad boy's right around here, right? Does that help?
Yep.
Let me see. Let's switch over to red real quick, just to kind of give you an idea what the SST-based system sees, right? And hopefully I did this right. Let's take a look. So, again, very similar to the OH Perry. This is a pocket cruiser, basically a patrol ship, missile cruiser. Here we go. Okay, so the same thing. It's a small. The OH Perry was a small too, but this is the Russian pocket cruiser. Radar horizon of small versus small straight up is 19. The monolith T versus small is 61 nautical miles. So where is that? That is the blue. So that's this line right here. All right. So what I wanted to show you was that in this case, the evaporative duct reduces the range. You see that? The potential maximum range of the monolith T. Okay. And so again,
so if he was active and it fell within that blue circle, then he'd only get a line of bearing, correct? He wouldn't get all the other information.
hold on. The ES with the ES small versus small with evaporative duct is actually larger than the monolith T small range. So if for some reason the OH Perry was in this really small, he would get, yeah, if you were passively, let's turn on both sides real quick. Where is he? He is within, it's a little bit too close, but if this frigate was, which band are you asking about? This is the
I'm asking about the green to blue bands for the Russians. Like
So
what's going
here.
on? Yeah,
Okay.
what's going on in there?
What's going on is the evaporative duct is actually shrinking the maximum potential of that radar, right? But here's the deal. If you look back at the fire control, the SST is over the horizon, right? So he ignores all of this, right? So if this guy in this situation, he could fire, he could start getting a resolution here. How far will he fire? 43. He could get a good resolution potentially, right? I'd need to go through the whole fire control, but or at least he can get a fair, right, or whatever, right? So he doesn't have an FCS modifier, which modifies you on the row you're on, right? So for the Russian, he's like starting on 1. This is the turn a target is first detected. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, it's 0 for the first turn, right? But for the American, they start back here, and again up here for active. So it takes the American potentially 1 or 2 more tactical turns to get a fair, if they're even allowed to, right? Things to think about, right? That's where I think the game can be won or lost potentially, right? It's that little sliver. It's knowing the game to this level of ranges that can give you a slight advantage in playing. Let's go back to this. I just want to make sure I said all this right. So this is the radar range. The green is the small versus small with the evaporative duct. So again, it kind of compresses it in the case of our example.
Can I ask a question here real quick?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I know the range is reduced from the evaporative duct, so if they're between the blue and the red, wouldn't they get those little superfluous type signals and unable to find the range?
They would still get passive. Is that what you're asking? They would still, yes, they would get the ambiguous if their ES system, if their SST system being used as an ES would still pick up the target. Like if the OH Perry was like right there. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah, you would get that more ambiguous bearing and degree, which is a passive detection, right? So if you wanted to start an FC resolution or a fire control resolution, you I think could, but again, you have this, depending on the range, you have a modifier, and then you're using the passive instead of the active. I don't want to get too deep into fire control. I hope I answered your question.
You did.
Okay. And that's about it. Good discussion, I think. And thank you for correcting me on those small. There are a couple things, and I will check on those 2 things that we kind of called out. Okay. But unless there's any other questions, I think that's about it.
Yeah, are you going to do this again? This was great.
Yeah, I hope I hope to do it to go a little bit deeper into the fire control, and actively firing upon the enemy, and potentially, we kind of went in a little bit to the fire control. I think enough that maybe the next time we do this, we'll talk about the inbound interception as well, right? So I think the next talk will probably be about an hour, or maybe even longer. So we'll talk about those range bands, and when the ASM, the anti-ship missile, is being detected, and when, how many times you get the SAM intervention, as well as the local or more point blank, like phalanx, or Gatling gun, anti-air. So beyond that, I would probably do like maybe even a third one, third and or fourth. It might even be a two-parter on subsurface sonar detection. That's where it gets. It's not. It just gets a little bit more fiddly at that point as far as modifiers, but at least as far as keeping track of all the systems that are going, because usually the subsurface has more than one sonar and a towed array and all this stuff, so you kind of have to do multiple resolutions at once. So cool. Was that helpful?
Very, very good. Very good meeting.
Yeah. All right, everybody.
I'm not sure what other people think about this, but maybe if you next time, like the more complicated math for FC, maybe give us the numbers, but don't do the math for us right away, and let us see if we can
that's a great idea. That's a great idea. It'll test me too. I'm not perfect at all this. I only just learned it recently. All right, everybody. That was good.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, thank you.